My name is Chezi Missia, and this is the Human Impacts on Soil Invertebrates. I don't know about you, but when I am walking and I see a worm on the sidewalk, I don't necessarily think of it as having many pleasant characteristics. As a child, I did find myself somewhat drawn to these insignificant creatures. I would actually collect them. Earthworms are essential in helping the ecosystem, so as I put them in a mason jar, I just look at how they were able to move around in the soil, but I never knew that these long, slimy creatures had a vital role on the earth. In my presentation, I will be talking about the worm's essential role in the environment and why they need to be protected. I will also indicate the different characteristics of a common earthworm on its biological level. And most importantly, I will illustrate that there are negative impacts that humans have on this species. Before I explain the different characteristics of a worm, I must point out that an earthworm is considered a soil invertebrate. You may be wondering what exactly is an invertebrate, or more specifically, a soil invertebrate. According to the Biological Dictionary, invertebrates are animals that do not have a backbone. Their bodies do not consist of an internal skeleton, therefore their bodies are soft. Based on this definition, a soil invertebrate is an animal that is soft and lives mainly in the soil. In science, there are 7 different categories when classifying a species, starting with the kingdom, going all the way down to the actual species name. An earthworm is in the Animalia kingdom, in the Annelida phylum, the Clitellate class, and the Oligoceta order. The Lumbricaceae family, and the genus name is Lumbricus, leading us to the name of the species, Lumbricus terrestris, or most commonly known as earthworm. Earthworms are very common, so they live all across the world. They mostly live in damp soil around dead plants or organisms. Worms will come out mostly during the night because the air is very damp and colder than it would be during the day. They prefer to be in the rainy rainforest, typically around wet mud near a body of fresh water. You may be thinking, well, how do worms eat, and what do they eat? It's hard to believe, but worms actually do have a mouth. They obtain food by using their pharynx and saliva to pull the food back into their mouth. Earthworms are considered omnivores, meaning they eat both plants and animals. They usually eat a wide variety of different matter, but mostly dead plants and animals. Some of these include animal feces, bacteria, fungi, leaves, and many other different organisms. Earthworm reproduction is actually very fascinating, and they are unlike any other soil invertebrates in that they are what is called a hermaphrodite. This means that they have both male and female sex organs that can produce the egg and sperm. They have 2 male openings and 2 sperm receptacles, as well as a pair of ovaries that produce eggs. According to sas.upenn.edu, 2 worms line up in opposite directions from each other, so sperm is able to be exchanged. Then a structure called the colitillum, which is one of the visible characteristics in worms, will form a slime tube. As the worm tries to move out of the slime tube, it will pass the female structure, picking up the eggs, and the male structure will store the sperm. Then the slime tube will form an egg cocoon, and fertilized eggs will be developed. Earthworms have many adaptations associated with them, which is very necessary in order to survive. A wide range of unique adaptations include structural, physiological, and behavioral adaptations, according to sciencelearn.org. Earthworms have what is called a stream-like body, meaning unlike any other species, they have no antennas or legs, which allows them to move easily so they can go underground into narrow burrows. Another structural adaptation that they have developed are circular and longitudinal muscles, and they are able to work together to move easily. A unique physiological adaptation that they have is the ability to recognize environmental change in their habitat. When their environment changes to an unwanted habitat, for example dry soil, the worms will travel further down to a colder soil area and curls up into a ball until the soil becomes moist again. A behavioral adaptation is a learned or inherited behavior that helps them survive. A behavioral adaptation includes coming out later at night because their skin is very sensitive to light, therefore if they are exposed to light they could dry up. You may not realize it, but earthworms actually have a significant impact on the ecosystem and play an important role in the world. According to National Geographic, worms are heterotrophic. However, they are most specifically classified as a detrivore. This means that they do not make their own food and they need to rely on other dead, decomposed matter to survive. They occupy the lower level in the food chain, but this is a very important level because without them, they cannot provide energy or nutrients to other organisms needed to survive. There are many different important roles that Lumbricus terrestris or earthworms have on the ecosystem. Without their roles, the planet would not be the same. According to Soil Association and earthwormstalk.org, these roles include recycling nutrients, improving soil structure, and repairing damaged soil, as well as providing a food source for the other species. The main role earthworms play is recycling nutrients. They are able to naturally fertilize the plant because when they eat, they break down matter in a process called decomposition. Then other fungi and bacteria feed on this broken down matter, and this process allows nutrients to be released and reuse this new organic matter in the soil. This enriched soil provides plants and trees the nutrients needed to survive. In addition to this, earthworms are able to create mounds called castings, which have a huge abundance of different nutrients. These castings create 5 times more nitrogen and 7 times more phosphorus. Another very important role of worms is to improve the soil structure. As the earthworms travel down into the soil, they make burrows which allow space for water to be drained into, and without their work, flooding could occur. Thinking about the different roles of an earthworm, one can conclude that without them, all the soil would become dry, and plants would not be able to grow and provide nutrients for our atmosphere. Our land would also flood because when worms create these pathways, they allow the water to be drained down into the earth. So the next time you think about stepping on a worm, you might want to think again. So how does this relate to how humans have a negative impact on these species? Many people use an unnatural herbicide on plants because understandably they would like to kill unwanted weeds or other plants. However, they may not realize that these products could have a negative impact below the surface, including harming the worms. In 2015, a study was done by Gub Berghausen and his team. They wanted to test to see how glyphosate-based herbicides would have an effect on earthworms. They used 2 types of worms, burrowing earthworms and soil-dwelling worms, to show the effects of Roundup, which is a common herbicide used today. Their studies showed that earthworm castings activity only lasted 3 weeks until they died, and the other species was not as affected, but their reproduction was reduced by 56% after 3 months of application. Not only did the herbicides kill the earthworms and diminish the reproduction of the soil-dwelling worms, the concentration of nitrogen and phosphate in the soil increased dramatically. Based on their results, the concentrations of nitrate went up by 1592% and the phosphate by 127%, which could not only affect the ground beneath us, but this could also go into lakes and streams. So basically, the number of earthworms in the soil actually regulates the soil nutrient amounts, and too high of a concentration is very detrimental. As you can see from the graph over here, from the experiment, the number of surface casts that the earthworms produced decreased with the herbicide applied. And then this graph over here shows the different nutrients. So the number of different nutrients increased with the herbicide when the herbicide was applied. Another negative impact would be tillage. Many farmers use this method called tillage, which is a mechanical method of preparing the soil for the process of agriculture. It is very fast and convenient for farmers, but it may have a negative effect on the earthworms. Another study was done by Stephen Crittenden and his team, and they wanted to see how tillage would indeed impact earthworms. They performed 2 different studies, one in a short period of time, around a month or so, and one over a 4-year time frame. Their results showed that the earthworms decreased after 3 weeks due to plowing. However, over the 4-year study, their worms were able to recover by the spring. Based on these studies, well-accepted gardening techniques could be harming the earthworm species. Overall, earthworms have a very unique and vital role in the environment, and people should appreciate these creatures because without them, the world could look very different. And here are my references.